Hey everyone, and welcome back to Middle School Minds the Study Pod. This is where we like to take a deep dive into history, so you can totally crush those tests and maybe even, impress your friends with some cool trivia.
We're all about making learning fun and accessible.
So buckle up because today we're going way back in time to explore a network of routes that literally stretched across continents and empires.
Get ready to discover the secrets of the Silk Road.
We're going to cover its history, its impact, and even some of the dangers that were faced by those brave enough to travel its length.
It's going to be a wild ride.
But before we get into all of that, are you ready for our favorite segment?
Oh, here we go.
Dad jokes. I got a real knee slapper about the Silk Road.
All right, lay it on me. I'm sure I'll be rolling my eyes in no time.
Okay, why did the Silk Road never get lost?
I don't know why.
Because it had so many silk signs. Get it? Silk signs, like road signs.
Okay, you got me. I chuckled.
All right, enough with the jokes. Let's get down to business. To really understand the Silk Road, we need to imagine a world without cars.
Or trains.
Or even planes.
That's right. Imagine a time when the only way to travel long distances was by foot, animal, or boat.
This is where the Silk Road comes in, connecting the East to the West for centuries.
For centuries.
So what exactly was the Silk Road? Was it like a giant highway paved with silk? Like its name suggests?
Not quite. The Silk Road wasn't actually a single road, but it was a network of interconnected routes that spanned over 4,000 miles across Asia, from ancient China all the way to the Mediterranean Sea.
4,000 miles. Wow, that's like traveling across the entire United States.
And it wasn't a quick trip either. Traveling the Silk Road could take months, even years.
So if it wasn't actually paved with silk, why was it called the Silk Road?
Well, while many goods were traded along these roads, silk was definitely the star of the show.
Wow.
It was a luxury good that was produced in China, and its exquisite quality made it highly sought after throughout the entire world.
I bet. I've actually felt silk before.
Yeah.
And it's so smooth and soft.
Why was silk so special back then? Well, for starters, it was incredibly strong and lightweight. Imagine having clothes that are both durable and comfortable, especially in hot climates where some of these routes pass through.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. It probably looked really amazing too, right?
Absolutely. The vibrant colors and the intricate patterns that were woven into silk fabrics made them highly desirable for clothing, tapestries, and even artwork. In ancient Rome, silk was literally worth its weight in gold.
Wow, that's valuable. So we know that silk was like the main attraction. But what other things were traded along the Silk Road?
Oh, there was tons of stuff. Think of it as a giant ancient marketplace where East met West, along with silk traders transported spices, tea, porcelain jade, glassware, wool, gold, and even horses along these routes.
Wow, it sounds like a treasure trove of goods from all over the world. Did people just trade objects? Or were there other exchanges happening along the Silk Road?
It was more than just a marketplace. It was a highway for the exchange of ideas, religions, and technologies. It was a place where different cultures collided and influenced each other.
That's incredible. So it wasn't just about getting rich. It was about connecting with other cultures and learning new things.
Exactly. For example, Buddhism, which originated in India, spread eastward through the Silk Road and eventually became a major religion in China.
Wow. And it wasn't just religion that traveled along the Silk Road. Even something as simple as paper, which we use every day, was introduced to the West thanks to these routes.
That's right. Paper originated in China and made its way westward, revolutionizing the way people communicated and recorded information.
It's amazing to think how something as simple as paper traveled such a long distance and changed the world.
That's the power of the Silk Road. It wasn't just about the goods themselves, but about the cultural exchange and the spread of knowledge that occurred along the way.
I'm starting to see why it's considered such a significant part of history. But 4,000 miles is a long way to travel, especially back then. It couldn't have been easy, right?
You're absolutely right. Traveling the Silk Road was a challenging and often dangerous undertaking, and we'll dive into those challenges when we come back.
Welcome back to Middle School Minds, the Study Pod. We are continuing our exploration of the Silk Road. And last time we talked about all the amazing things that were traded along these routes.
We also touched upon the cultural exchange that happened, like how Buddhism spread to China and paper traveled to the West.
Right. But let's be real. Traveling 4,000 miles back then could not have been a walk in the park.
No.
What were some of the challenges faced by those who journeyed along the Silk Road?
Well, imagine this. You're crossing scorching deserts like the Taklamakan, where temperatures can soar over 100 degrees. You're facing sandstorms that can blot out the sun and make it impossible to see.
That sounds intense.
Huh.
What about those treacherous mountain ranges?
Oh, yeah. Those were no picnic either. The Silk Road went through some of the highest mountains in the world, like the Himalayas and the Pamir Mountains. We're talking narrow paths, icy conditions, and thin air that can make breathing really difficult.
So these travelers weren't just merchants, they were like tough adventurers. Did they travel alone, or did they team up for safety?
Traveling alone was way too risky. Instead, traders formed caravans, which were like giant moving cities. They traveled with hundreds of camels carrying goods and supplies, accompanied by guards to protect them from bandits.
It's like a real-life action movie. Bandits. Tell me more about those guys.
Bandits were a constant threat along the Silk Road. They would hide in the mountains or deserts waiting to ambush caravans and steal their valuable goods.
That's scary. Did the traders ever fight back?
Absolutely. Caravans were often equipped with armed guards, and some traders even learned to defend themselves. It was a dangerous life, but the potential rewards were really high.
Yeah, I can see why people were willing to take the risk. But even with caravans and guards, I imagine there were still accidents and mishaps along the way.
Of course, the Silk Road was unpredictable. Animals could get injured or lost, supplies could run low, and people could get sick. It wasn't just bandits and weather that they had to worry about, but also the basic challenges of survival.
So it really took a special kind of person to travel the Silk Road. What qualities do you think were most important for these traders?
Well, they had to be brave and resourceful, able to adapt to challenging situations. They also needed to be patient, as these journeys could take a very long time. And perhaps most importantly, they had to be open to new experiences and willing to interact with people from different cultures.
It sounds like they were some of history's first cultural ambassadors.
Speaking of different cultures, how did people communicate along the Silk Road if they spoke different languages?
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Along the Silk Road, a kind of common language emerged,
Oh.
a mix of different tongues that allowed people to trade and share stories, and even bargain for better prices.
That's amazing. So they created their own way to communicate, like a Silk Road slang.
You could say that. And it wasn't just spoken language. They also used gestures, facial expressions, and even drawings to get their point across.
This is so cool. I never thought about how important communication would be along the Silk Road. It wasn't just about trading goods, but about connecting with people from all over the world. Exactly. The Silk Road fostered a spirit of cultural exchange that went far beyond just the exchange of goods. People shared their traditions, beliefs, and even recipes, creating this vibrant tapestry of cultural influences.
It makes you think about how connected our world has always been, even centuries ago.
And that's one of the most important lessons we can learn from the Silk Road. Even though there were challenges and dangers, people from different backgrounds were able to come together and create something truly remarkable.
Okay, I am officially hooked on the Silk Road. But I have to ask, if it was such a big deal, why did it eventually decline?
That's a great question, and we'll be answering it in our final segment as we uncover the factors that led to the decline of this legendary network.
Welcome back to Middle School Minds, the Study Pod. We've been on quite a journey exploring the Silk Road, from its bustling trade routes to the incredible cultural exchanges.
And all of the challenges.
Right. It's hard to imagine that something as vibrant and influential as the Silk Road eventually declined. What happened?
Well, it's important to remember that the Silk Road wasn't like a single entity, but it was a complex network of routes that thrived for centuries. And its decline wasn't a sudden event. It was a gradual process influenced by a bunch of different factors.
So it was like a perfect storm of historical events that led to its downfall.
Yeah, one of the biggest factors was the rise of maritime trade. As shipbuilding technology improved, sailing across oceans became a much faster and more cost-effective way to transport goods than traveling over land.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you could hop on a ship and reach your destination in a few weeks instead of spending months trekking across deserts and mountains, I know which option I'd choose.
Exactly, and ships could carry way larger quantities of goods, making sea trade more profitable for merchants.
So it was like the ancient version of choosing between snail mail and email. Sea trade was faster and more efficient, so the Silk Road became less popular.
That's a great analogy. Another major factor was political instability. The Silk Road spanned across many different empires and kingdoms. And as these empires rose and fell, the routes became more vulnerable to disruptions, conflicts, and even wars.
So it's like trying to run a business in a place where the rules keep changing and there's always a risk of conflict.
Exactly. And with increased political instability came decreased safety for travelers and merchants. It became much riskier to travel the Silk Road, which also contributed to its decline.
I bet that made things pretty tough for those who relied on the Silk Road for their livelihood. Were there any other major events that contributed to its decline?
Oh, we can't forget about the Black Death, a devastating pandemic that swept across Asia and Europe in the 14th century. And this pandemic had a catastrophic impact on trade and travel as cities were quarantined and people were too afraid to interact with each other.
Wow, a pandemic that disrupted global trade. That sounds kind of familiar.
It does. The Black Death had a huge impact on the world, and the Silk Road was not immune to its devastating effects.
So it sounds like the Silk Road faced challenges on multiple fronts. Competition from sea trade, political instability, and even a global pandemic.
That's right. And it's important to remember that history is rarely shaped by just a single event. It's often a complex interplay of various factors that lead to change. And the decline of the Silk Road is a perfect example of this.
This has been an incredible journey. We've learned so much about the Silk Road, from its vibrant beginnings to its eventual decline. It's amazing to think how something that happened centuries ago can still teach us so much about the world we live in today.
I agree. The Silk Road is a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the interconnectedness of our world. It reminds us that even though empires rise and fall, trade routes may change, the human desire to explore, connect, and exchange ideas continues to shape our world.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this epic adventure along the Silk Road, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those imaginations firing.